Hey, it's Medium Jenny Lee, and I'm here with the next Raw Contact discussion. We are on session 16, which means this is video number 17, and this session is pretty long. As a matter of fact, the next one is pretty long too, so I'm going to get right to it. This video doesn't end up being too freaking long. Okay, free will. How can the Guardians quarantine the Earth? Is this quarantine within the free will distortion? The Guardians guard the free will distortion of the mind-body-spirit complexes, or people, of the third density of Earth. The events will require activation of quarantine were interfering with the free will distortion of the mind-body-spirit complexes. So the things that were happening were interfering with free will, so they activated the quarantine. Which, remember, a quarantine is saying that no alien or celestial bodies will come and walk among us. Not that they're not going to watch us, not that they're not going to contact us telepathically, not that some things won't sneak in through the gate, but that nobody's going to come walk among us. Okay, so asking about the Orion group interfering. How is this balanced against the other concept you gave? The balancing is from dimension to dimension. The attempts of the so-called crusaders to interfere with free will are acceptable among the division of their understanding. However, the people of this dimension, you call the third form a dimension of free will, which is not able to recognize and fold the distortions toward manipulation. So they can do it just by getting away with it, because it just slides under the rules. You know, like finding a loophole. And we don't completely understand manipulation all the way, so that's why it can happen. Thus, in order to balance the dimensional variances in vibration, a quarantine was set up. This being a balancing situation whereby the free will of the Orion group is not stopped, but given a challenge. Meanwhile, the third density group is not hindered from free choice. So they made it much harder for the Orion group, but they can't take the Orion group's free will away either. And it also gives us free choice, whether we're going to continue with self-service to others or service to self. Could these windows that occur let the Orion group come through once in a while? Does this have to do with free will distortion? Correct. Could you tell me how it works? It's like a random number generator with certain limits. It operates from the dimensions beyond space and time in what you call the area of intelligent energy. It's like the rhythms of a clock striking, except in case of the windows, no entity has the clock. Therefore, it seems random. So the windows that open up in this web of quarantine fence, shall we call it, or protective shield that they've put around Earth, there's always going to be chinks that open up, but no one ever knows when one's going to open up or where. It's always going to happen, but nobody knows when. So the window balancing prevents the Guardians from reducing the positive polarization by totally eliminating the Orion contact through shielding, correct? Partly correct. The balancing allows an equal amount of positive and negative influx. It's less negative and is necessary than positive due to the somewhat negative orientation of your social complex distortion. Oh, goodness. So more positive needs to come in because we're already somewhat negatively oriented oriented as humans. You can see that I wrote, yikes. So we're already assholes, and so that means that there's going to be less asshole energy coming in, because we really need a balance with some more positivity. Okay, thanks, Ra. Okay. Next question. Equal opportunity to choose service to others or service to self. Yes. So there's going to be equal opportunities to do either one. Okay, next question. Confederation, if the Confederation landed on Earth, would they be taken as gods, breaking the law of free will, reducing the polarization, service towards all? And would the same thing happen if the Orion group landed? How would this affect their polarization toward the service to self if they were to land and people thought they were gods? In the event of mass landing of the Orion group, the effect of polarization would be strongly towards the increase of service to self. And the Confederation would be the opposite. That makes sense. Next. So, if the Orion group is able to land, would it increase their polarization? What I'm trying to get at is, it's better for them to work behind the scenes and get recruits from our planet. The person on our planet going towards service to self strictly and of his own free will, or is it just as good for the Orion group to land and claim that they're gods? The first instance is the long run, but it's more salubrious for the Orion group in that it did not infringe upon the law of one by landing, and thus it does its work through this planet. So yeah, even though it takes longer for people to turn towards one way or the other, that's the better way. In the second circumstance, a mass landing would create a loss of polarization due to the infringement upon the free will of the planet. However, it would be a gamble. If the planet then were conquered and became part of the empire, the free will would then be reestablished. This is restrained in action due to the desire of the Orion group to progress toward the one creator. This desire to progress inhibits the group from breaking the law of confusion. That sounds like a fun one to learn. The law of confusion, which I guess is also, wasn't that also the law of free will? Like it's just another name for it. So this is interesting. What is the empire? And that's exactly what Dawn asks. The word empire made me think of the movie Star Wars. Is it somehow an allegory for what's really happening? You know, like we start putting together those pieces, you know, like I think the Matrix and the Men in Black movies like really started us thinking about like, is this what's really happening? This is correct in the same way that a simple children's story is an allegory for physical, philosophical, and social complex distortion understanding. So, yeah, in a way. Is there a harvest of entities oriented towards service to self, like there's a harvest of service to others? There is only one harvest. Those that enter the fourth dimension through vibrational complex levels may choose the manner of their further seeking of the one creator. So it doesn't matter whether you're service to self or service to others. If you've reached the level, you're going to be harvested into the fourth dimension, the fourth density. But then you choose whether you're going to be service to self or service to others. So we split, basically. The individuals go into the fourth density, will go to planets or places where there's service to others, and the others will go to service to self. Correct. So that really clears that up, because that's pretty much what I thought at the very beginning when we had first read what it meant to be fourth density. And that just like really clears it up. There's no question anymore. When we get to fourth density, we split. Okay, has the Orion group been attempting to contact any part of this planet prior to the 75,000 years? Or how long have they been attempting to contact the planet? So I think Don was just trying to ask how long have they been contacting the planet, but maybe he forgot that there wasn't really high enough density beings here before 75,000 years ago. So he rephrases his question. Approximately 45,000 years ago, an attempt was made and it was not successful. Now, in this particular part, Ra gives the wrong dates, and Ra comes back in another in the next session to clear up the dates. So I'm going to read the correct dates so that we're not confused. So approximately, this is supposed to be 3,600 years ago. The Orion group sent an entity of social memory complex to the planetary sphere. This effort met with some success, but it was in the space-time continuum lessened in impact. And then around, this is supposed to be 3,300 years ago, this group, since approximately this is 3,300 years ago, this group has constantly been working upon the harvest just as the Confederation. So 3,600 years ago, the Orion group actually sent an entity that manifested in some way down to Earth to move people towards the service of self so that they could be harvested to the fourth density. And then 2,300 years ago, they've both been like working really hard to try to get people to move up. What's the name of the entity? Yahweh. So this might get a little bit sticky situation here. Remember, I'm just the person reading the book. I'm just the person disseminating the information. So if this part rubs you completely wrong because you have some connection to this word or this idea or this concept, I'm very sorry. There'll be some more things in the next session that shake people up even worse. I don't think this one's going to be too bad. So I looked up Yahweh because I knew that it was a name for God, but there's more to it than that. So around the year 300 BC, which pretty much lines up with this 3,600 years ago, is when we start getting information in Israel about this Yahweh guy. And this is what historically they have discovered, this is historical fact at this point. Yahweh was one of many gods of ancient Israel, and he is associated with weather and war, interestingly enough. And the belief in Yahweh as he was at that time ended around the early Iron Age or the late Bronze Age. So, in 300 BC, before the Iron Age, before the late Bronze Age, the people of Israel are still kind of having a multi-god religion. Hasn't shuffled down to one yet, and Yahweh was just one of them. But then Yahweh gets used as a word for just God himself. So you have to break the distinction down here, people. When Ra is talking about Yahweh, he's not talking about the name for God. He's talking about this deity that shows up and is associated with weather and war when the Israelites still had multiple gods. Okay? Okay, because he's going to come back up in the next session, and I just want you to know. All right, can you tell me about the 10 Commandments? Now, this is also going to blow some people's minds, and I feel real bad for Moses. Okay, the origin of these commandments follow the law of negative entities impressing information upon positively oriented peoples. The information attempted to copy or ape positively while retaining negative characteristics. You can see what I have written. Because I would say, you know, I'm not up on my Judaism, so I don't know if the Jews follow the Ten Commandments or not, but I know that it's something that Christianity brings up over and over and over again as a huge thing. They want to put it on, like, you know, frickin' governmental places. And here is Ra saying that the information came from negative entities. And you'll see why in a minute, because at first it doesn't make a lot of sense, because, you know, we've got it in our brains that these 10 commandments are like ways to live your life, or like ways that you should be a good person. But it's the way that it's phrased. And it's well, you'll see. Okay. So it was done by one of the Orion group, yes. The purpose of the Orion group, as mentioned before, is conquest and enslavement, and this is done by finding and establishing an elite and causing others to serve the elite through various devices, such as the laws you mentioned and others given by this entity. Yikes, that's saying some real bad stuff about the Ten Commandments. But here, it's going to get explained a little bit more. Was the recipient of the laws of the Ten Commandments positively or negatively oriented? So this is good. This is good. The recipient was one of extreme positivity, thus accounting for some of the pseudo-positive characteristics of the information. So poor old Moses, which here is using, Ra's using the name Mushi, which is probably more accurate, is saying that good old Moses, well, it really was a good guy, real positive person, wanted to help others. But unfortunately, he was duped by this not so positive entity who called himself Yahweh. Okay. As with characteristics which are not successful, this entity vibratory complex, Mushi, Moses, did not remain a credible influence among those who had first heard the philosophy of one, and this entity was removed from the third density vibratory level in a lessened, saddened state, having lost what you may call the honor and faith with which he had begun the conceptualization of the law of one and the freeing of those who were of his tribes, as they were called in your time and space. Poor Moses. He was trying to do good. He thought he was on the right path. Then this frickin' nasty guy from the Orion group shows up, tells him a bunch of stuff. He gets it a little bit mixed up. And then he ends up dying thinking that he didn't, you know, he didn't accomplish what he wanted to. So, how was the Orion group able to contact him if he was positively oriented? This was an intensive battleground between positively oriented forces of the Confederation origin and negatively oriented sources. The one called Mushi, or Moses, was open to impression and received the law of one in its most simple form. However, the information became negatively oriented due to his people's pressure to do specific physical things in the third density planes. This left the entity open for the type of information and philosophy of the self-service nature. And here's where it gets a little more, Don gets it. And it's by adding the words, thou shalt not. Correct. So by putting it in a negative sentence, you cannot do this, is going against people's free will. It's really that freaking simple. By making a rule or a law that says, you cannot do this, you should not do this, it's going against people's free will. And people that people that are positively oriented towards others would never do the stuff that's in that list anyway. They don't have to be told not to do it. You know? I don't know. I guess some of them aren't all oriented towards others, though. But anyway, this has gotten very sticky situation because we're getting into people's religions, and when you get into people's religions, they think that they know every single thing about their religion because they've studied it and people have told them, and they feel like they got it. But they don't realize that's all distorted. Like poor Moses with his poor 10 Commandments. He was understanding the law of one, and he wanted to share it, and instead it got completely jacked up, and now people are still following it. I shall say no more. Okay. Can you give me some kind of history of your social memory complex and how you became aware of the law of one? The path of our learning is graven in the present moment. There is no history as we understand your concept. Picture, if you will, a circle of being. We know the alpha and omega are intelligent and infinite intelligence. The circle never ceases. It is present. So Ra is saying that they don't think about their past because they're always thinking about their present. It's like a circle. The densities we have traversed at various points in the circle correspond to the characteristics of the cycle. So instead of telling us any like specific details about their becoming, about their third density and about moving up to fourth density and how they figured it all out, they're not going to tell us. They're just going to go through the stuff we already know. The first cycle is awareness. The second cycle is growth. The third is self-awareness. The fourth is love or understanding. The fifth is light or wisdom. The sixth is light, love, light, or unity. So putting the love and the light together, the wisdom and the understanding together. Seventh is the gateway to the eighth, and the eighth is the octave of which you move into mystery. And then nobody knows. They don't know what's after the eighth because you start a whole nother cycle. Okay. It was stated by the Confederation that there is actual no past or future. It's all present. Is this a good analogy? There is past, present, and future in the third density. In an overview, such as an entity may have moved from time-space continuum, it may be seen that this cycle of completion there exists only the present. We ourselves seek to understand this understanding, and at the seventh level or dimension we shall, if our humble efforts are sufficient, become one with all, thus having no memory, no identity, no past or future, but existing in the all. Okay. So this was something that I had been getting kind of confused about in previous sessions, and I might have even mentioned it yesterday, that in, let's just call it the spirit world, there's no time and space. Time does not exist. But Ra continuously gives us time measurements, 25,000 years, 75,000 years, etc., etc. And I finally felt like I was starting to understand it this morning, I think, before I even started reading the session for today. And this clears it up. So there is time, there is past, present, future when we're in third density. And also the fact that we live on a planet, a physical planet in a physical place, whatever that really means, because there was mention of holographs. And that planet itself has electromagnetic entrance points of energy. And time and space is a factor in the planet itself. While we're here in third density, physical bodies, all of those things also apply to us. So the space and the time applies to us when we're on the Earth in a third density body, but not afterwards. Okay, I feel like I'm starting to get that. All right. Does this mean that you would have awareness of all that is? That's partly correct. It is our understanding that it would not be our awareness, but simply awareness of the Creator, and the Creator is all that there is. Therefore, this knowledge would be available. So it's interesting here because Ra is talking about their own ascension. Ra won't really go into details about their past densities, but Ra is talking about their present and future densities. They're saying that they are working towards moving up to the 7th dimension. And they're not even really sure what will happen when they get to the 7th dimension, but they know, they think that they know that they're not going to have a memory, identity, or past. They'll be existing with all. They're not sure if they'll understand everything, but the knowledge will be available. Kind of weird, huh? Okay. How many inhabited planets are there in our galaxy? And this gets confusing because I believe they go over it fairly soon. And it's come up a little bit previously that, and we should probably go over it now so people don't get confused. When we think of the word galaxy, we're thinking of the Milky Way galaxy, which has, you know, X number of stars, X number of planets. But when Ra talks about a galaxy, Ra is actually referring to our solar system. So just our sun with our planets. And so it gets real confusing. Okay. We are assuming that you intend all dimensions of consciousness or densities of awareness in this question. Approximately 1/5 of all planetary entities contain awareness of one or more densities. Some planetary spheres are hospitable only for certain densities. Your planetary sphere, for instance, is at this time hospitable to levels or densities 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, what is Ra talking about here? So Dawn asks about in our galaxy, but then Ra says, we assume that you intend all dimensions of consciousness or densities of awareness. So is Ra talking about, like, I think Ra is talking about everything. Out of everything that exists, 1/5 of the planets have awareness of one or two densities. Some are only hospitable for certain densities, and ours is only hospitable for 1, 2, 3, 4. How many total planets in this galaxy of stars that we're in have aware life? Roughly how many total planets in this galaxy of stars that we're in have aware life regardless of density? 67 million. In our galaxy, 67 million? What? Okay, can you tell me what percentage of those are 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 6th, etc.? A percentage of 17 for first density. 17% have first density, 20% have second density, 27% have third density, 16% have fourth density, 6% have fifth density, and the other information is being withheld for free will purposes. There is a fairly large percentage, approximately 35% of the intelligent planets, which do not fit in the percentiles. These mysteries of the 6th and 7th density are not available for our speaking. So Ra is not allowed to tell us the precise percentiles of the 5th and 6th individually, but Ra does say that 35% of them are able to have 5th and 6th. 5th and or 6th. Right. That's quite a lot. The first 5 densities have all of them progressed from 3rd density by knowledge and application of law of 1. Correct. Then the only way for a planet to get out of the situation we're in is to become aware and start practicing the law of 1. Correct. Can you tell me what percentage of 3rd, 4th, and 5th density planets, which you have spoken of here, are negatively polarized towards service of self? We may only say that the negatively or self-service oriented planets are much fewer. Good to know. I would like to make an analogy about why there are fewer negative oriented and ask you if the analogy is good. So this is Dawn's analogy. It's much easier to get things done, to create the service to other principle and to grow in positively oriented communities than it is in the negative. Correct. So it's like you can get more people to help each other when you're trying to work for others than you can by manipulating people to just do stuff for you. Can you tell me how the Confederation of Planets was formed and why? The desire to serve begins in the dimension of love or understanding, to be an overwhelming goal of the social memory complex. Thus, those percentiles of planetary entities plus approximately 4% more of who identify we cannot speak, of whose identity we cannot speak. Okay, so 4% of them they can't talk about, found themselves long, long ago in your time seeking the same thing, service to others. The relationship between these entities as they entered our understanding of our beings, our other planetary entities, and other concepts of service was to share and continue together these commonly held goals of service. Thus, each voluntarily placed the social memory complex data in what you may consider a central thought complex available to all. This then created a structure whereby each entity could work in its own service while calling upon any other understandings needed to enhance the service. This is the cause of the formation and the manner of the working of the Confederation. So there was quite a few entities that wanted to serve others. They found each other. They decided to share their information with each other, and they started the Confederation. Is there any reason for this relatively small percentage in the Confederation of 4th and 5th density planets? There are many confederations. This confederation works with the planetary spheres of 7 of your galaxies, which is really 7 of your solar systems, and is responsible for the callings of the densities of these solar systems. So there's a lot of confederations. The one that Ra is in and is helping only 7 solar systems within our localized space. So here's where they clarify what's what. Dawn asks, can you define galaxy, which he's tried to get Ra to do before. And finally, it is termed that it's a star system. So it's the solar system. We got it. How many total planets, then, does the Confederation that you are in serve? The galaxy term must be split. You call a galaxy that vibrational complex that is local. This, your sun, is what we call the center of a galaxy. So still, again, trying to clarify the difference between galaxy and solar system, the way we think of it and the way that Ra thinks of it. Okay. So Now that they've cleared it up, do you know of the evolution in other galaxies beside this one? We're aware of life in infinite capacity. Very specific there. Thanks, Ra. Can you tell me of the progression of life in other galaxies, similar to the progression in this one? The free will choosing of what you call galactic systems causes variations of an extremely minor nature from one galaxy to another. So then the law of one is truly universal in creating progression toward the eighth density in all galaxies. Correct. There are infinite forms and infinite understandings, but the progression is one. So everything might vary a little bit, but moving up the different densities is always the same. It's not necessary for an individual to understand the law of one to go from third to fourth density. Is this correct? It is absolutely necessary that an entity consciously realize it does not understand in order for it to be harvestable. Understanding is not of this density. Question mark? So what? So is it kind of like what is that old saying about a fool and a smart man? It's like a fool thinks he knows everything and a smart man realizes he knows nothing, or something like that. Is that what this is talking about? It is absolutely necessary that an entity consciously realize it does not understand in order for it to be harvestable. Understanding is not of this density, not of the third density. Well, as you can tell by my face, I'm clearly not understanding. So this, okay. Okay. Sounds like maybe I used the wrong word. I meant to say was I believe that it is not necessary for an entity to be consciously aware of the law of one to go from third to fourth. And Ross says this correct. Which that comes up again in the next session. Again and again. At what point in densities is it necessary for an entity to be consciously aware of the law of one to progress? The fifth density harvest is the one whose vibratory distortions consciously accept the honor duty of the law of one. This responsibility honor is the foundation of the vibration. So remember, the fifth density is about wisdom and light. So that seems like it might be the density where you truly start really understanding things and learning it in a wisdom type of way, is what I'm thinking. Can you tell me a little bit about the honor responsibility? Each responsibility is an honor, and each honor a responsibility. Thanks for clearing that up, Ra. Appreciate it. Okay. Okay, then Don asks, Don will skip from weird question to weird question. He'll be like on a kick where he's like on a specific subject, and then all of a sudden he'll throw in something real strange. And he even says here he might not put it in the book, which it might not have originally been in the book that they published, but in this particular edition, it's the re-listened to one, and they put all the questions in there. So Don asks about cattle mutilations. Don wants to know what the hell is up with the cattle mutilations. And this is very, very strange. The greater part of your so-called mutilations take place according to the ways of your second density beings, which feed upon carrion. A portion of these so-called mutilations are those which are of what you may call multidimensional type, a thought form construct using various parts in order to have life and being in third density. So to me, that makes it sound like there are multidimensional beings that don't have a body that would like to have a body, so they go and take parts from the cows so that they can try to make their own body. What? What in the what? Heck and heck. Oh my goodness. Okay. Where do these thought forms come from? Excellent question, Dawn. This is a very ambiguous question. Firstly, they come from the Creator. Secondly, they come from what you may call the lower astral inner plane thought. Thirdly, in construct visualization, they reside in part beneath the crust of your planet. There's a lot of information to unpack in this little paragraph, and to be honest, I don't know what the what. Okay. So I read this session yesterday, and that night, so not last night, the night before, my whole entire dream state, sleeping time, was completely full of somebody saying, you need to recognize a thought form. You need to be able to recognize a thought form. It just kept going over and over, repeating like a record, a broken record. You need to be able to recognize a thought form. The whole night I'm trying to sleep, it just replayed over and over again. And so then my mind starts thinking while I'm sleeping, how the hell do I recognize a thought form? And then I don't know where this thought came from, but then I was thinking, this is what my brain thought as I was sleeping. And I was hoping that I would find some sort of information. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so while I'm asleep and someone is continuously telling me, you need to be able to recognize a thought form, I'm like, well, I wonder if a thought form wouldn't have access to intelligent infinity. That was what I was thinking in my sleep. And while I was sleeping, it made complete sense. Because if it was a thought form, that means it was thought up by something or somebody else originally. And while I was sleeping, it made sense that if it was thought up by somebody else, that it wouldn't be able to access intelligent infinity because it wasn't from the original thought. However, upon waking up, I realized that that cannot possibly be true because everything is a co-creator. So even if something else created it through thought, it is also of the intelligent infinity because it was created by a creation. And then I read this session yesterday after I had spent the whole night freaking out about how I'm supposed to recognize a thought form, and the answer was right there. They come from the Creator. So even thought forms have intelligent infinity. Because everything has to. But they come from lower astral inner planes, and they reside beneath the crust of your planet. So like not in the ground, but under the crust. And if they don't have a body, they could very easily move through the ground to get under the crust. Unless they're making bodies out of cow parts, and then I think they'd have to stay. They'd have to stay above the crust. Either way, that was some real weird stuff, and I don't know what to think about it. Are these one form in particular? These entities may take any thought form associated with an emotion of fear or terror. That clears stuff up, though. It's the scary bad stuff. The scary bad stuff are these lower astral thought form entities stealing cow parts. Okay. So thought forms have been able to attack only cattle. Can they also attack human beings? These thought forms cannot attack third density beings. So if you are self-aware, you cannot be attacked. That is excellent, good, great, wonderful news, people. If you are self-aware, they cannot attack you. They can scare the crap out of you, but they can't attack you. But the poor cows who are not self-aware get left to be torn apart. Okay. This was something I had not the faintest idea what Dawn was asking about. I never heard about this. If you've heard about it, please let me know. Can you tell me of the silver flecks that we have found sometimes on our faces or elsewhere? I had never heard about people having silver flecks on their skin. Have you? So, this little part here, these next little 2 paragraphs, is some interesting stuff. These are what you speak of a materialization of subjectively oriented signpost indicating to one person or another and no other a meaning of subjective nature. So as you can see, that was very confusing. And then Dawn asks, who creates them? Are they real? Now this is, I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this. Okay, listen to this. The increasing potential for learned teaching. At some point, a sign will be given to indicate the appropriateness or importance of that learned teaching. The entity itself, in cooperation with the inner planes, creates whatever signpost is most understandable or noticeable to it, which I took as spirit signs. But then Dawn asks, so you're saying we ourselves create these? Entities consciously do not create these. The roots of mind complex, having touched the understanding intelligent infinity, create them. Okay, let's unpack all of this. Because when I first read it, I kind of got a little bit sad, because I was like, if we're creating them ourselves, which is not what Ra said, if we're creating them ourselves and we in the woo-woo world think of them as spirit signs, that spirit is coming and leaving us these little nuggets of bits of information to follow like breadcrumbs through the woods. And then Ra saying that we create them, I was a little bit sad because I was like, but I don't want to create them. It's way more magical to think that like the universe out there is creating them for us to follow, the synchronicities and the signposts and the spirit signs. But that's not what Ra said. Ra said that it's the roots of the mind complex touching the understanding of the intelligent infinity. So the entity itself in cooperation with inner planes. So it's still, it's still confusing, first of all, but it's definitely, it's catalyzed by us, because we're the individual bit of intelligent infinity that needs the signpost, that needs the sign, that needs the synchronicity, so that we can start piecing all of things together so we can understand and learn. But it's also something else, part of the intelligent infinity, part of the mind, roots of the mind complex, part of the inner planes that also sends us these things too. It's in cooperation with. So that makes me less sad, but makes it confusing, because I really felt like I understood spirit signs, and now I'm not so sure. And I think the words that are throwing me off are the inner planes, roots of the mind, those two things. Those parts are throwing me off. So what do you guys think about that? Please let me know if you have some sort of interpretation of this information. Okay, so the silver flecks in the skin. I looked it up, and it went down a whole nother rabbit hole of craziness here. So scientifically, there is a silver that can build up in your skin called Collodial Silver, and it causes a disorder called Argyra. And it's also another disorder that's a genetic disorder, which I'm probably not going to be able to pronounce, methemoglobinemia. Which is so interesting because I had recently, not that long ago, listened to a podcast called, it's the series Supernatural with Ashley Flowers. They're not making any new ones, but there's a ton of them, and I haven't even listened to all of them. But it's the Blue People of Kentucky. So this is a real family, the Fugates of Kentucky, from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And they had this disorder, which was caused by genetics, and it's super rare because both parents have to carry the genetic mutation. And it just so happens that there was a mom and a dad who, the dad was blue, and the mom happened to be carrying it also, and they had a bunch of kids. And even into more recent times, you can look it up. There's a picture of him. Where he was on like some sort of television show where they're blue. Their skin is blue. The whites of their eyes are blue. It's crazy. But it's a scientific thing. And it's getting completely off topic with the blue people. But it's really interesting if you want to look it up. It turns out that it was a super easy fix. And that when they figured out how to fix it, they could start taking some, I think it was some sort of vitamins, and it made their skin turn normal. But anyway, the colloidal silver is something that actually can form within your skin. So that's, I don't know if that's related to these manifested silver flecks, like it's, you know, something your body actually makes, and maybe that's where it's coming from. I don't know. Is it possible for you to give a small description of the conditions in the fourth density? There are no words. There are no words for positively describing the fourth density. We can only explain what it's not to approximate what it is. Beyond fourth density, our ability grows more limited when it comes to words. Fourth density is not words unless chosen. It is not bodies made of chemical complexes. It is not disharmony with self. It is not disharmony with other people. It is not without limits of possibility to cause disharmony in any way. That sentence was confusing. It is not within limits of possibility to cause disharmony. So you can't even cause disharmony. Approximations of positive statements. It is a plane of a type of bipedal vehicle which is much denser and more full of life. So they do have some sort of bodies in the fourth density. Ra is saying they have a bipedal vehicle which is more dense and more full of life. Clearly it would be more full of life because it's all the life forms from a whole planet, which would make sense why it would need to be more dense. But it is not made up of chemicals like we are. You know, we're carbon-based critters. They are not made up of elements. It is a plane wherein one is aware of the thoughts of other selves. So you know everybody else's thoughts and feelings. It is a plane where one is aware of the vibrations of other selves, so you can recognize each other's energy. It is a plane of compassion and understanding of the sorrows of the third density. They're real worried about us, because remember, we're the festering wound on their leg. It is a plane striving toward wisdom and light. They're trying to move up to fifth density. It's a plane wherein individual differences are pronounced, although automatically harmonized by group consensus. So everybody is still has an individual differences, but it doesn't matter because everybody's harmonized together. All right. Could you define the word density? The term density is a mathematical one. The closest analogy is that of music, whereby after 7 notes on your Western type of scale, the 8th note becomes a new octave. Within your great octave of existence, which we share with you, there are 7 octaves or densities. Within each density, there are 7 subdensities, and within each subdensity, 7 sub-subdensities, and so on infinitely. So even each density has an infinite number of subdensities. And once you get to the 8th, it goes up to a whole new scale, which Ra isn't aware of because Ra hasn't got there yet. Okay. So this expands at an extremely large rate as things are increased in powers of 7. Does this mean that in any density level, anything that you can think of is happening? And then, Dawn gets real confused. For your confusion, we select the concept with which you struggle. That being infinite opportunity, you may consider any possibility probability complex as having an existence. Anything is possible because there's infinite opportunities. How exciting and slightly scary. So then Dawn's like, so say you're daydreaming, would that become reality? This depends upon the nature of the daydream. It's a large subject. Perhaps the simplest thing we can say is if the daydream, as you call it, is one which attracts to self, then this becomes reality to self. So if the daydream is specifically about yourself, and I would think you have to put in the law of attraction here, that you truly believed that it was going to happen, and that you thought about it over a decent amount of time, that you could make it come true to yourself. But if this is a contemplative general daydream, this may enter the infinity of possibility-probability complex and occur elsewhere, having no particular attachment to the energy fields of the creator. So you could dream up something, but it might not happen around you if it doesn't have to do with you. So be careful what you're daydreaming about, people. Okay. To make this a little more clear, if I were to daydream strongly about building a ship, would this occur in one of these other densities? This would have, or shall occur. So once again, be very careful what you're daydreaming, because Don's a real sweet guy and he just wants to daydream about building a ship. But some of you other people might be dreaming about some weird stuff. Okay. So what if the entity daydreams strongly about battling another entity? Would that occur? In this case, the entity's fantasy concerns the self and someone else. This binds the thought form to the possibility-probability complex connected with the self, which is the creator of the thought form. This then would increase the possibility-probability of bringing in the third density occurrence. So it's possible that if you're daydreaming about fighting somebody, that it very well could happen, but because it brings in another person, I think it makes it more complicated. Does the Orion group use this principle to create conditions brought about to suit their purpose? The Orion group uses daydreams of hostile or negative vibratory natures to feed back or strengthen these thought forms, so absolutely yes. Do they ever use gratification of the physical body to amplify daydreams? They are able to do this only when there is a strong ability on the part of the receiving person towards the perception of thought forms. This could be termed as unusual characteristic, but has indeed been a method used by the Orion entities. So I wish that Don would have given an example of what he meant by gratifications of the physical. I can kind of imagine what he's talking about, but I'm not exactly sure what he meant there. But Ra's saying that they can if the person is has a strong ability towards thought forms. The many wanderers coming to this planet now and in the recent past, are they subject to the Orion thoughts? As we've said before, wanderers become completely the creature of third density and mind-body complex. There is just as much chance of such influence to a wanderer entity as to a regular old mind-body spirit complex of this earth. The only difference occurs in the spirit complex, if it wishes, has an armor of light which enables it to recognize more clearly that which is not as it would appropriately be desired by the mind-body spirit complex. This is not more than a bias and cannot be called an understanding. Furthermore, the wanderer is, in its own mind-body spirit complex, less distorted towards the deviousness of third density positive negative confusions. Thus, it often does not recognize as easily a more negative individual, the negative nature of thoughts or beings. So let's go back and think about poor old Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla was a wanderer of higher density who had a clear game plan to come here to Earth to help us not rely on energy that had to be paid for, so that we would have more leisure time to be able to learn the law of one and move up in densities. But poor old Nikola Tesla got a little bit turned around, just like what Ra is describing here. That they have an armor of light which will make them recognize more clearly what they're not suited for, but because it's less distorted toward positive negative confusions, it might not recognize negative as negative. That makes stuff real complicated. Let's continue, we're almost done. Would then the wanderers as they incarnate here be high priority targets of the Orion group? Yes. Wonderful. Okay. And if a wanderer were to be successfully infringed upon by the Orion group, what would happen to the wanderer in the harvest? If the wanderer entity demonstrated through action a negative orientation toward other selves, it would be, as we have said before, caught in the planetary vibration, and when harvested, possibly repeat again the master cycle of the third density as a planetary entity. So if you screw it up enough, you're going to have to start all over again. Which brings me back to when Ra mentioned the foolhardiness / bravery of people that decide to come back after they've finished, which is kind of what I was talking about yesterday. That's like kind of terrifying. Like you've spent thousands of years working up to become a higher density being. You come back to, you decide, you make the conscious decision to come back to help others. You get karmically involved. You do some real bad stuff and you got to start it all over again. Foolhardiness indeed. But it's in service to others. What can you do? Anyway, I'm sure this video has gotten entirely too long, so I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget there's a ton of discussions before this one. There'll be a ton of discussions afterwards. Please join the discussion. Questions, comments, concerns. If you have information about any of the stuff that I'm real confused about, I would really love to hear it. So please put it down in the comments, and I'll see you tomorrow for another one. Bye.